So what's the significance of what we heard over the weekend? What's going to have the longest lasting impact? Is it just a month of production cuts, or is it about compliance, or is it what Saudi's doing on price?
Hi, good morning there. Well, it's a good point you mentioned there. I think the announcement over the weekend was certainly fair, I would say, welcomed by the market. I think if we don't see these cuts extended, certainly through into July, then you'll see that length start to build in the market again. And so we certainly needed this extension, basically. I think it's always been an issue with compliance whenever there have been kind of OPEC agreements. And I think it's very interesting that the Saudis and Russia coming on board are now enforcing it, because from what we've seen, there has been a kind of a huge variety in terms of levels of compliance across countries who have essentially signed up to this. Clearly, the Saudis made a very, very big effort through May, considering just how high their exports were in April. They brought them down by over 3 million barrels into May, and they seem to be holding those levels at this point in time. I think it's worth highlighting, though, that we are still seeing that length in the market. We are still building crude inventories onshore. China, yes, it has increased its imports massively. So there was certainly an increase in crude demand through May. But they still built inventories onshore, and we're actually seeing a bit of a reversal of that, where yes, their inventories are building at the same time, and actually to a greater extent that their imports are building. So we really need to see this cut kind of continue. And as the Saudis and the Russians have highlighted, countries such as kind of Nigeria and Iraq to kind of really come into line with this as well.
What kind of rebound are you seeing on the demand side, Alex, as we see economies lifting the lockdowns?
Well, that's a good point. I think that one of the most obvious areas, say, was China. So if you look at their change in imports, their change in crude inventories onshore, that was suggesting about a 1.2 million barrel a day increase in kind of apparent demand, or implied demand, sorry, for China in May. Now, as I say, we have seen that drop back a bit. We've seen that come off, kind of looking like about 300 KBD, 0.3 of a million barrels a day over the course of June so far. It's still very early days, though. But then if you look further to the west, we're still seeing this very steep drop-off in crude imports into OECD Europe, so kind of developed world Europe. Their imports are down 1 million barrels a day over the last couple of months. So there's still this very big kind of disconnect. And if you look at what's happening in the product markets, and not just the crude oil, but what's happening in, say, your transportation fuels, we're still seeing inventories being kind of volumes being held offshore, holding at those levels as of a month ago. So any kind of uptick in demand, there's still a lot of product waiting to fill that gap as well. You look at the US, again, the numbers are increasing, but they're still down. Say, gasoline demand in the US is still down around 20% year on year. It has improved a lot, but it is still kind of, it's a tricky balance at the moment.
Alex, if you were when you're looking at state oil companies and looking at $42 a barrel on Brent, some people talking about 50 now, do you see state oil companies being tempted to reopen production and to really seriously start those conversations about not extending production cuts, to go backwards? What's the pressure like as the oil price rises?
Well, I don't think we're there yet. I think that the rhetoric at the moment has been actually they've seen how this is working. This could kind of be the first time that that we've seen this change, in that there is going to be this compliance. Ultimately, we've only been in kind of a cut territory for not yet 6 weeks. So I think it's probably premature, and certainly at these price levels, they'd want to see a kind of stability around here. I think it's a bit premature to think that NOCs will be looking to come back, especially when you have the kind of the threat of what the rhetoric from Saudi and Russia around, okay, you really have to comply. We've done all of the heavy lifting so far in the last over the course of the last month, and I think the repercussions if they don't toe the line are very high.